Today I'm going to be talking about the importance of mental health in athletes. As an athlete, it is easy to find yourself only focusing about winning your next game or thinking about practice the next day. Today, many athletes have a hard time focusing on their mental health when they are prioritizing less important things. I'm going to share my story and talk about how important it is for athletes to have the opportunity to get the mental health they deserve. In high school, I played 3 different sports and found out how easy it can be to only focus on sports and academics. During my senior year, I realized I was not prioritizing my mental health, and I began to fall into a slump. Getting out of that slump is by far one of the hardest things I've ever accomplished in my life. I cannot imagine how much more difficult it is for college and professional athletes since they are playing at a much higher level. Today, I'm going to share with you about how athletes ranging from high school, collegiate, professional, and so on should have the opportunity to get the mental health when they are struggling. Now you may ask yourself, how many athletes struggle mentally? The main problem when it comes to athletes is that colleges and professional leagues are more focused on an athlete's physical health than their mental health. This can easily make athletes fall into a slump like me because they are not prioritizing their mental health, because the people around them aren't prioritizing their mental health. Data from the American College of Sports Medicine indicates that 35% of elite athletes struggle with eating disorders, burnout, depression, or anxiety. That said, conversations about mental wellness have become more prevalent and commonplace. But if they're becoming more prevalent and commonplace, then why are these athletes still struggling the way they are? And why are they not getting the help they deserve? The second thing I want to point out is a focus on athletes' physical health over mental health. Even though an athlete has to be physically well to play a game, they should also be mentally stable. If they don't have the right mindset, they're not going to be able to play the game as well as they would if they did have the right mindset. The third approach I want to look at is how athletes all over the world are held to a higher standard. They are held with expectation, stress, and people wonder, why is it so difficult to be an athlete? Athletes are afraid to come out and tell the world how they are feeling mentally. They should never be afraid to talk about their mental health. It is not fair and it is certainly not healthy. Let's look at it this way. If a professor is not feeling well mentally and cancels class, we would be happy to a certain extent, and we would not worry about not having class or be upset about it. However, if we were to say Stetson Bennett says he was not feeling his best mentally and just came out and said, hey, I can't play in the game this week, it would be a much different approach, and this would make people all over the world upset with him. And that just shows how athletes are held to a much higher standard whenever they shouldn't be in the long run. Some other things I want to look at is other athletes' stories and how they reached out and got help and how it helped them in the long run. The first thing I want to look at is my story. Like I said earlier in the introduction, I was in a slump at one point in my life, but I reached out and I got help, and I'm not sure what I would have done if I never got that help I needed. So reaching out is so important, and it's so crucial for athletes and other people. Let's also look at Kevin Love's story. The Cleveland Cavaliers' Kevin Love had suffered in silence for most of his life, relying on basketball to manage what he calls a lifelong battle with social anxiety. After he suffered a panic attack during a game against the Atlanta Hawks, Love left the game, facing questions and criticism from teammates who didn't know he had suffered from depression. Love began to speak out. Love became the NBA's face of mental health when he published a first-person essay for the Players Tribune, followed by a compelling interview with ESPN's Jackie MacMullan, pulling the veil off depression and anxiety in pro sports. I think Love's story really helped other athletes that were also struggling. And even though it might not have came on the way he wanted it to, he's doing much better now, and he's also helped many athletes all over the world. Let's also take a look at Michael Phelps' story. Olympic gold medalist Michael Phelps also has struggled with mental health and chose to speak about it and help other athletes in his situation. The hardest thing to understand is you can't just put your mental health on a timeout, Michael Phelps said. Through Phelps' recovery, he talks about how important it is to seek help and that it is not a bad thing to get help. It is something that changed his life, and he doesn't know where he'd be at if he never reached out and got that help. Phelps is now a vocal advocate of therapy with athletes. He knows many other athletes that are struggling, much more than he was at the time, and he wants to help, and just how he was helped and flipped his whole life around. In conclusion, Athletes are normal people too. They are tough, and I can never imagine feeling what they feel on some days because how high they're held with expectations. Since they are athletes, this does not mean they do not struggle mentally too. They are normal people. To sum it up, athletes need to be taken more seriously when it comes to mental health. They deserve to get the help they need, and it should never be something brushed under a rug. A sprained ankle should be treated the same way as an athlete that suffers mentally. Thank you.